Dr. Jazz.
I want to start with your trio. You know, I've been listening to your music for a really long time now, and you know, I talked to both Clarence and John as part of this series.
Oh, you did?
Yeah. You know,
Yeah.
I played with John years ago, and I love, you know, he's one of the funniest and best musicians out there.
Yeah.
And but you know, I watched this on YouTube. You have this Return to the Road kind of 5-6 minute beautiful video.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to ask you, when does your story with John and Clarence begin? How did you decide for those two guys? I mean, they're probably two of the best on their instruments. There is like top 5 or whatever, but you seem like such a nice unit when I see you together, like also when talking. And
yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, the thing is, the trio was a long time coming for me. I mean, I think a lot of pianists start there, or at least you know, kind of live there. And I started there probably like early in my career, but I don't even think of it as career, just early in my development, perhaps. But you know, and then I kind of avoided it, and then I had a few close musician friends that were kind of pestering me, saying, "Yeah, you should do a trio, man. Really, you should do a trio. Come on, man. Nobody knows you as a piano player. Do it as a trio." You know, and I'll produce the record for you. Just, you know, do a trio. And so I just kind of like, yeah, I'll get to it. I appreciate it, you know. And then finally, you know, at the time, I guess around 2010, I started playing with John there in his group.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, Rambling Confessor.
Yeah, and so we really hit it off, and I just kind of checked a lot of the kind of points of curiosity or points of interest and points of importance for me in terms of things that I like to sort of explore with another player in such a intimate setting, which even though that group is a quartet, it was still a really intimate sonic setting. And so I just kind of really fell in love with how I could kind of weave with him sonically. And you know, personally, as you said, he's a funny guy and he's a great hang. So we kind of had started building this rapport in his group. And, you know, so this whole trio conversation is sort of orbiting me for a couple of years until I finally just said, okay. I actually had tried it. I had done a trio gig at Dizzy's with Andrew Cyril and John.
Seriously? Oh, man.
Yeah, it was beautiful, you know. But I knew that, you know, Andrew wasn't likely to be the kind of guy that was able to kind of commit to going on the road with me and doing a lot of things that I was hoping to do if I was going to take this on at some point. So I knew that it was probably tricky to build it around having him be a part of the group. Excuse me. So I kind of knew that that was sort of just a great opportunity to be able to play with him because, you know, that was always something I had hoped to do, not just with Andrew, but just musicians of his generation and his caliber when I got to New York was sort of like, that was, you know, what everybody almost, you know, dreams of doing, playing play with these kinds of cats. You know, I years ago, I'd really hoped I was going to make a record with Billy Higgins, and I got talked out of it, and I wish I had just done it because I think it would have been awesome because he kind of was into it, you know. So anyway, but so then in 2017, I got a cancer diagnosis that basically put me on hold and like had to reevaluate my life. And so at that point, I was, you know, kind of thinking, well, you know, I'd been doing some gigs with John, with my wife, Tanya, who's a singer, and so I just was kind of, and I was still thinking about drums, but you know, at some point, I remember I went to a show. I did a show at Winter Jazz Fest, and Clarence played in the band after my band. He played with Uri Kane, and my wife had been on the show with me, and she went home, and I called her and said, "You have to come back. I need you to hear this drummer," because you know I'd known Clarence for a long time, like since we both moved to New York, but we just never played together. So I really, we just knew each other and you know heard each other millions of times, but just never played together. So I was just kind of digging everything that he was doing with that set with Uri, my wife came back. She's like, "Wow, it's great." And so I introduced them, and they both are big foodies. And so he was kind of, in the elevator ride down, he's like, I said, Clarence, we got to play together, because I'm thinking at this point I want to do a trio. That voice of my friends is getting monotonous at this point. I'm like, okay, I'll do it. I kind of, I'm amping up for this now. And then Clarence just was like, because I didn't really know who I wanted to have on the drums. And then that concert just kind of did it for me, where I was like, that's it. And so he said, call me that. I said, so we started doing a couple gigs together with my wife, and she was like, "Oh, yeah, this guy's great. So sensitive, is great playing with a singer. Of course, like some of the greatest. So he's got that pedigree, right?" And then when I got this cancer diagnosis, I was like, "Okay, I'm gonna have to really kind of chill out on some of these more ambitious projects for a second, and maybe 2 other people is all I can focus on." And it just sort of felt like it was a time to just sort of think that way. And because I was doing a few gigs with my wife, it was kind of an easy way to play, kind of within the sort of context of my personal relationship, where as I was sort of thinking about where I was going, with my health and just mentally and professionally, and all these kind of things converging really. And so it was kind of a nice synergy where I was able to play gigs with her and play with these guys as a sort of alternate universe for that personality that I knew we would be exploring, whether one way playing standards and another way playing original compositions and freely improvised stuff, and just kind of thinking about like the sort of threshold of all those relationships, and so that was great, and then I mean, Krantz wasn't great, but I mean, having that as a sort of catalyst to kind of this is what I want to take this on. So I just took it on, and it became like, oh yeah. And then, we started playing together. I remember the very first gig that we did as a trio was at the Jazz Gallery. It was about like a week before I had surgery. And I wasn't talking about it to anybody, but it was just like, it was such a joy for me, because it was like this wonderful first date, where I was like, oh yeah, I made the right decision. These guys, they don't play together that much outside of this band. They have in different situations, but not the mainstay of a lot of the gigs that they've done over the years. So it was interesting to kind of like see where they were going to land with each other and then with me. And it was fun enough that it was like, because I didn't really have any music. I just had an idea at that time.
Wow. Okay.
I mean, nothing really written for them. It was just kind of, let's play a gig. I got a couple of sketches of some things repurposed from other projects, but nothing that was really ours. So it was sort of a first date to just sort of test the waters, and it was such a wonderful first date. I'm like, yeah, I want to do this. So that's kind of the long version answer to your question.
But did you, like, when you did Remission, you wrote some amazing, beautiful music there, and you kind of had those guys in mind, right? When you wrote those
at that point,
right,
at that point, because what happened is I ended up recording. What happened? So I decided, okay, let's make a record. And at the time, then I just had some music. We'd done some gigs, a little one-offs and stuff like that, and it was like, okay, let's go to the studio. So I booked a studio, and then right around the same time, my wife was like, "Oh God, you guys are going to make a record. I really want to make a new record. I'm going to book a session too." So she ended up booking a session about a month apart from what we had done, and so we ended up recording her thing. I recorded our thing. I kind of started looking at it, and it was like, I don't think so. Sonny said was like, we'd give me a date to release it and everything, and I just listened to it. I was like, this isn't happening. So I don't think I got it mixed. No, I didn't get it mixed. I just did rough mixes myself. I was like, yeah, this isn't happening. This was music that wasn't meant for us. It was just music that I had. And I was still in my mind trying to learn how to write for this particular group, because I was still kind of, in a way, writing for Adapt Theory as though it was a trio. And so that was that first draft that just kind of, okay, nice attempt. It was trying to get the temperature right before you cook the pancakes,
Yeah.
So then we went on the road the following year, and I had written music then and figured out what I wanted to do with these guys. Music. We went on the road, but I still didn't have a plan to go in the studio. I just was like, I had these gigs, and we're in the middle for early part of the tour, and Clarence just said, "What are we doing here, man? We don't have a record. Like, what are we doing? Like, you're selling these other CDs on the gigs. Like, what are we doing?" And he's like, I was like, "You're right. What are we doing? Yeah." He says, "We could be by the end of this tour, we'll be good. We can make a record, you know." And so we pull out our calendars and we're like, "Okay, can you do this day?" It's like the day after we get back. Everybody was like, "Good." I said, "Okay, let me see if I can get a studio." And then I got a studio, and I was like, "Great, we'll go in and make a record." So that's how the record was born, you know, in those two stages. But then in the actual stage of the what got released was just like a little bit of nudging from the band, which I appreciated, to just like, let's do this, you know. And then we finished the tour. It was only about a week, but it was enough to get that material really solidified, and then we made a record. So we kind of repeated that actually this excuse me. We kind of repeated that in this summer too, because I wrote a whole bunch of new music, and we went.
So is a new one coming?
Yeah, I haven't mixed it yet, but yeah, we recorded it in July.
Oh man, fantastic!
With a couple of guests on it as well.
Oh, fantastic! Beautiful. Yeah, I wanted to ask you. You know, I love the tunes you wrote, especially with those two guys. You know, John and they're both so elastic in time, but then you know they can do the depth theory kind of thing where they really lock together, and all the music I think you wrote was like really. It's such a beautiful mix of this tension creating and then like releasing it. Or I don't know how to describe it, but like, so I'm really looking forward to a new one because it's such a nice piano trio. You know, it's like a heavy jazz tradition there, and I think you found a nice voice there.
Thank you so much. I mean, I'm glad you appreciate that, because that's kind of really like what was emerging as like, this is important to me. Like, you know, you go through your career and you sort of like reflect on what was formative in your development and what artists really, you know, you kind of like, what thread do I come from? And you're like, geez, I come from a bunch of these different threads, and so how to acknowledge them in your own work, and as you sort of pick these different projects to go after. And so there's this very kind of swinging, you know, Oscar Peterson, you know, homage that comes, you know, in my thinking, but there's also this very elastic, you know, Keith kind of thing that comes into my playing. There's this groove oriented thing that comes out of like different things that Chick has done or that Herbie's done, you know. And so there are all these people, and then there's just this sort of angularity that I think speaks to different music that I've been exposed to. And then there's just totally open stuff, which, you know, again, speaks to that lineage. But like those guys, they're really, it's a funny balance between which one either one of them will land in. I mean, I feel as though in a certain sense I'm probably the most neutral musician out of between the three of us, you know, in terms of where we would be in our sort of default state, perhaps, you know. So but you know, they can speak multiple languages, so it's not even up to me, but it's really fun. I feel really blessed being able to.
I see you as a glue in this trio. I know it sounds funny, but like, because those two guys are like, you know, like two planets around, like.
Yeah, you know, and that was the hard thing, finding the right music to explore. And it's actually in this new record, I mean, both of them, they contributed original compositions.
Oh, fantastic!
As well.
Beautiful.
And so, you know, that's another interesting thing too, is sort of bringing their sound in that way, but also having other composers in the mix to sort of further to kind of determine like what's the unison response to this particular musical question, you know.
How do you write for this trio? I mean, I don't know the new record yet, but you know, let's say like Winter Palace or you know, it's all the tunes are so beautiful, that drive-by tune, or like how did you approach, or do you approach composition like that? Like, let's say Winter Palace. I mean, how did you compose that one? Write down, start with the melody, or?
I mean, Winter Palace actually had this intro that we don't even use. They kiboshed it when we started rehearsing it. They're like, "What is this? This is like a whole other tune." So that didn't even make it. It could become another tune, probably, now that I think of it. But yeah, I think I wrote it with a certain expectation of what I wanted as the groove, and then they just did something that was equally complementary to it. And so it was enough for me to, I suppose, write in terms of the direction of where I thought the piece was going, just in terms of its structure. It's sort of almost like a like temp music in a film, you know, where you're like, I have enough of that pacing to kind of go, all right, this is how I'll get, you know, from here to here. In the final analysis, the way they played those grooves, it still works. It just wasn't, I didn't have to lay it out. And so, you know, I did that a lot writing the drum parts, you know, very specific drum parts. I didn't go that far on this music. I may have, you know, sketched out ideas that could be used, but in the end, I know Clarence is going to have to sort of like such an interesting way of being able to play groove without beating you over the head with groove. Yeah, you know, it's sort of there without it sort of becoming so blatantly groove that it's like, okay, great, you're grooving. And that's what's kind of wonderful about it. It sort of dips in and out without having to tell somebody to do that. So you get the best of both worlds. You get the color and you get the drive. Yeah, I love that with him. Yeah, he's so, he has this, I don't know, elastic. It's the word when I hear him play drums, you know, with whoever it was, like with Brecker, I heard, or, you know, with all the modern stuff, whatever, Adam Rogers or Chris Potter, or, you know, it's like, it's all the time, like really beautiful. Yeah. But you mentioned Keith Jarrett and Chick Corea and, you know, Oscar Peterson. I always love this question, like, you know, what was for you the moment, I guess, mid-'80s, or when you said, like, okay, man, shit, I want to do this. Did you hear one of these artists, like, live or like a record, or? I mean, I started listening to jazz when I was pretty young. And so Oscar was a big sort of like, you know, kind of like, you know, like it was very hard to escape the magnetism of sort of the genius of Oscar Peterson. Being grown up in Canada, it was like he's sort of like a national treasure, and he was even in the 70s when I was coming up. But I think also like hearing McCoy and hearing Bill Evans, and I don't know if there was just this, okay, that's it, I want to do this. I think I just sort of, I just knew, I don't know, I don't remember when I knew I wanted to do this. I just know it was pretty early on. I just didn't know what this is. I didn't know what that meant, you know. I had no working illustration in my immediate existence to have any, you know, comprehension. Yeah. What the hell does this mean, you know? So it just was a vague notion, you know. But I think that a lot of those different pianists and artists that we've been talking about have had that kind of impact. I know that when I saw Monk play, not in person, but you know, on video. When I saw him play in video, that was really profound. I couldn't quite figure him out before I could see him play. And when I saw that Straight No Chaser movie, it changed him for me really profoundly. Yeah, it's incredible. Yeah. I think, you know, but I mean, like when I was in high school, I was really into a lot of the fusion stuff that was happening in the 80s, you know, and so that, you know, my early bands, that was sort of like, you know, where that was coming from. Weather Report, Pat Metheny, you know, Brecker and those guys, you know, for sure. Chick, you know, Electric Band stuff. It was like that was kind of like I'd already checked it. It's like that wasn't how I started, but it was just so prevalent in that a period of my life. And it was also the music that my friends in high school, if we were going to listen to music, generally speaking, because they were really into like Led Zeppelin and all this other kind of stuff, it was like that was sort of the middle ground that they could hang with. I couldn't put on a Tommy Flanagan record or a Bill Evans record necessarily and be able to hang with them socially with music. So that was sort of like the weird middle ground anyway. Well, that's an interesting one. Yeah. Pat Metheny, actually, it's a good one for that. Always. Yeah. Like Still Life Talking, you put that album on and it's like, okay, what is it? You know. Yeah. People can, it's still amazing music. Yeah. And sure. But it's, you know, as an adolescent person who's like, you know, all the stuff and the crap that goes along with that, where you're like, I want to fit in with everybody, you know, and like if I'm into this totally weird music and nobody else, it's like it just sort of becomes this sort of insular kind of thing, which pre-social media kind of existence, smartphones, pre-internet, pre all this stuff.
Sure. Yeah. Did you see some artists like coming to Canada back then? That jazz
sure.
musicians and gigs like.
Oh yeah. No, I went to see lots of concerts. But when I was really young, when I first started getting into jazz, my brother-in-law used to take me to clubs when I was like way, like way underage, and he would take me to clubs to see different musicians that were coming to Toronto, because at the time, a lot of artists, they'd come to Toronto. There's great players in Toronto, so they'd pick up a rhythm section there. Sometimes they'd tour with their own bands. There were various waves of sort of jazz presenting activity through the 70s and 80s. At some point, there were clubs that were bringing bands in for a week. And there were simultaneously 2 or 3 of those happening at the same time around town. It was that was an interesting time, because there were, you could see Betty Carter at one club and you could see Elvin at another club, in the same week. And then you could see like Stanley Cowell playing solo piano at another club. So there was a lot of stuff going on when I was in high school and university in Toronto. That was definitely, I appreciated the access that was afforded to me by living there.
Yeah, especially, definitely. Yeah, and Toronto had a scene always, I guess, and still has.
Yeah, it still does, but that was certainly thriving,
Yeah.
And it was thriving way in the 60s and 70s too.
Yeah,
but it wasn't really I got into Bill Evans, and I forget how I got turned on him, because it was just sort of like, one artist leads you to another artist, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so I remember bugging my brother-in-law saying, he's coming to Toronto. Would you take me? And that was like his last concert. He died right after that. And I think my brother-in-law, he said, I talked to him just a few weeks ago. Earlier in the summer, he reminded me of that incident where he was just like, you were bugging me, and I wish because he said I had something stupid that I had to do, and and you were so insistent. You knew that you needed to see this guy, and I couldn't take you. So, and then he died, and he felt bad, but I said, don't feel bad, but it was just, it sort of stuck with him in a different kind of profound way, because here's this young kid who's like really wants to go hear this, and I couldn't go to the club by myself, so he was kind of my ticket,
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, it's these moments, I know.
Yeah.
But speaking of education, I've read you went to Banff then, and I've spoken to many musicians of your generation, or slightly older a little bit, and how important Banff was for everyone.
Yeah.
And I guess that's where you made the connection with Steve Coleman, right? Or how important was Banff for you? Like, did you already move to New York then? Like, or was that?
No, I had moved. I had just finished my undergraduate degree in Toronto, and all the musicians who were a year or two older than me in Toronto had gone to Banff and come back and told me how profound it was, right? And I was like, oh, really? Okay. So I wasn't hip to Steve's music at all. And the first time I literally met the guy was like he at that time he would do it. He would go around to major centers and do auditions at like half a dozen different cities around the world, I guess. I don't know. But Toronto was one of them. So he came and and I went into the audition, and that was the first time I met him. And I forget what I played for him, but I got in, and then I really just we spent a lot of time together. We played basketball in the evening together, hung out a lot, and sort of got my mind blown, as did a lot of the other people that were there that year.
Sure.
It was a pretty intense year, but yeah, it's funny you ask with Banff, how's that factor in? I was just out in Banff 2 weeks ago for the string quartet competition, because I've been commissioned by them to write a piano quintet for the winning string quartet, the Isidore string quartet, which is an amazing quartet. And so I was saying to some folks out there when I was there how pretty much every seminal kind of artistic moment, or just sort of a major turn in my life artistically, I can trace to Banff.
Wow.
So it's been a pretty special place for me. It started in 2000 or in 1990 when I went there and met Steve, but I met Ralph Alessi there. I met Benwell Delbecq there. I met Ellen Rowe, who's my colleague here at the University of Michigan. There, I met Steve there. I met Tony Malaby there. I met Ethan Iverson there. I met oh God, George Colligan.
Oh, yeah, sure.
It was a heavy piano zone. But I mean, Benoit and I met. We formed our duo.
Yeah, and I love Benoit. Yeah, I mean, he's
and so we met there, and it was like that planted a seed. Then we created our piano duo in Banff, in collaboration with the audio engineers and the sound department, and it was a huge Banff like synergy on that project. It was the idea was born there, just hanging out at the pub, meeting with some audio engineers, talking about the idea. Then I created another project there called Strings and Serpents, which was a project with a tap dancer from Canada who lives in New York, or doesn't live in New York now, but she lived in New York for a long, long time, Heather Cornell. Created that there, it's just weird, like just all these ties to things that you kind of go, and now this string quartet connecting with them through Banff, so it's interesting,
Yeah,
I owe that place a lot,
It's funny, yeah, like everyone said that, like especially like the Banffs from 85 to or 87 or to 90 something.
Right.
That period, like people
through Dave Holland and Steve.
Kenny Wheeler and all these guys were there, and Dave Holland, or it's just like
Muhal.
Muhal.
Yeah, Muhal. I didn't get Muhal there. I just got to hang out with Muhal when I moved to New York, but Muhal wasn't there the year that I came.
Oh, yeah. But still, I mean, did Steve then encourage you to move to New York, or like was
basically, yeah. Oh, no, he met me there. He sort of took a liking to me and saw that I was interested in his music, or had a ability to sort of understand what he was talking about, and I was starting to dig his music. I was like really just new to it, right? And so we stayed in touch, and then he totally encouraged me to move to New York. I wasn't really thinking about it. It wasn't something that even occurred to me.
Oh, wow, interesting.
No, I wasn't even like, oh God, I got to move to New York. It was like after meeting him, I started thinking about it, and realizing, oh, I see what you're saying.
How was that like when you moved to New York?
It was tough, but it was great because I was lucky. Because I mean, I moved to New York, and he basically had, I wouldn't say he paved the road, but he made a lot of pivotal introductions, right? So I met Cassandra Wilson through Steve and worked with her. Then I started working with Steve directly, Robin Eubanks, worked with him a little bit, played with Kevin a little bit, but I met those guys in Banff. They were there in Banff, but David Gilmour, Reggie Washington, all the people that we were in Five Elements, I met a lot of musicians through them, and then was able to kind of get going. But then Steve asked me to join the band, and it was kind of like, all right, well, I guess now I've got like something really exciting that I'm, this is maybe why I moved here,
Yeah. Like, Dropkick was the first one you did, right? With him.
Yeah, actually, the very first recording we did was the M-Bass Collective recording.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Which I was on just the very tail end of. It was literally we had one more session. They recorded 3 tunes, one of which was a tune that I wrote, and so they just been squeezing in those sessions whenever they could, and that was like right as I had just sort of a couple months after I moved to New York.
Interesting.
And then Dropkick was right after that.
Yeah, I love that album. I remember, I had my Steve Coleman phase, especially those records, basically all the records you're on, and I didn't have lead sheets, so I was just transcribing. So he's playing 7, and he's like, I had like writing down kind of a lead sheet. I still have those probably. So, It's like, what is this now? Like, and probably if I would see the lead sheet, it'd be like, what? Really? That's what it was.
You look at it and go, is that what I was thinking?
Yeah. But now I wanted to ask you, like, how did you cope with Steve music, like in the beginning when he explained the concepts that he was doing, and how did you learn that, like?
It was difficult. I mean, it was difficult. It was like learning it and then being able to apply it in the band and being able to respond to the way the band was, performing each night. That was my first tour was very difficult. It took me about a year to kind of like year and a bit to kind of feel like I wasn't
Wow.
like saying to myself I shouldn't be here, you know. And I appreciate the fact that he was, you know, committed and patient enough with me to let me find a voice and find a way, you know, because you know he could have probably called a bunch of different people if he wanted to, you know. So yeah, no, it was challenging, you know, but it was like you're learning a different way of, and you have to find how to, I guess, center yourself around that way.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, fortunately at that time there was a fair amount of activity, and so you know, going out on the road for 5 weeks was a reality.
Wow. Wow.
You
That's
know,
amazing. In Europe or everywhere, right?
Europe, or like not necessarily 5 weeks in the States, but maybe 2 or 3 weeks in the States a couple of
Yeah.
times in those early couple of years, you know, Japan, you know. So there was enough activity that you're like, you know, you're playing the music every night and you're hanging out. And, you know, when in between tours, I'd go hang out at his house and we'd talk about music. So I was kind of learning about how he thinks about the music,
Yeah.
you know, to the degree that I could at that point, you know, because obviously I'm not necessarily going to understand it the way he understands it,
Sure.
or at least the way he is, you know, what's he going for, you know, but I could at least get much closer than perhaps, you know, and he still leaves a lot of room, right? Because he wasn't necessarily going to tell you everything.
How was he as a band leader to you younger guys? I mean,
Yeah, he was generally pretty good, but he was pretty hard ass, you know, because he wanted he would rehearse until like the next day. Like it was
oh
like
shit! Wow.
he was just sort of tireless, and so sometimes you just sort of feel like, okay, I'm maybe not getting it anymore. You know, I need to like do something
Yeah,
else.
yeah,
And,
like yeah,
you know, and so that was maybe the hardest thing. It's just like because he could just go like a Duracell bunny. It's just like he would just like keep going. And you're like, no, I need to think about something else right now. I'm at tilt.
yeah.
So that's maybe the hardest thing to kind of wrap your head around. You know, it's like, okay, we're still going.
That's incredible. Yeah,
Yeah.
he seems to be like that. Yeah, I saw him live so many times, and
Yeah.
it's just like incredible. This
Yeah, you know, it's like that's that. I mean, I learned a lot about that, you know, from him in terms of watching him and sort of like, you know, both in my teaching, but also just in terms of my own gauging my energy and
yeah,
how to, you know, get things out of people and like, but pacing it too, because I think sometimes you gotta, it's a diminishing return if you don't say, okay, let's just breathe for a second.
oh definitely, yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, with Steve and kind of almost I think immediately after you left Steve, you did your first record as a band leader, right?
Around
And
that time, yeah.
around the time, how did I mean, you know, Steve's on it, and you know Reggie, Washington, and all these guys you played with, obviously Ralph, and but
Yeah.
how did you decide to do that record, and what was the
Uh,
trigger of becoming a band leader? I mean, like,
Yeah, it's funny I remember in 1990 I came to New York. Steve was playing with Dave Holland's quartet in the
man,
factory. A bunch of my friends in Montreal, where I was living, we drove down to New York because they had all been to Banff, so they had all essentially, well, I guess all but one had been to Banff, but they had two of the guys, three of us had been to Banff. The saxophonist had just been super into Steve and wanted to study with it, so we were all kind of motivated to go down and sort of check the band out. And so that afternoon, I went over to Steve's house and we just chat, you know, just sat on the front step of his place in Brooklyn at the time when he was still living there, and talked for a long time. And you know, this was sort of like around the time about like, okay, so you should think about moving to New York, you know. And so inside of that conversation, then I was like talking about wanting to make a record. And he discouraged me from making a record. He actually, you know, convinced me that, you know, it would not be in my best interest to make a record.
interesting. Why? Because like you're not ready then yet, or
Yeah, we didn't have
yeah.
anything to say.
Okay, yeah. Okay.
You know, basically,
Makes
it's the kind of thing you're going to regret if you make it now because, you know, you're probably not going to be playing with those musicians in a couple of years anyway. And, you know, just
interesting. Yeah.
Take the opportunity to be able to get some mentorship in, which I'm really appreciative that he was fairly, you know, forceful about his, you know, his convictions about sharing that bit of advice with me, because I've turned around and shared that same bit of advice with students of mine in the last few years who have been in a similar kind of dilemma. So, I was in the band then for, a bunch of records, 7, 8 years or something like that. And, I was doing gigs as a leader, in between his tours and stuff, and starting to feel like, I didn't want to just be only in his band. And it was like I wasn't playing in other people's bands to the degree that I was as busy as I would have maybe liked to have been. It was just hard to kind of marry that. And I even saw that with the other people in the band who'd left the band. It was like they couldn't, like Gene was playing with Michelle and Henry Threadgill at the same time. And it was really hard to juggle the 3 schedules. And I wasn't in one of those types of groups that was touring like that. So I just became more self-reliant on, I'm going to take what I'm learning here and apply it to like leading a band and see what works for me, and begin to kind of chip away at that. And so it was like, okay, I've got an opportunity to make a record. I guess maybe now is more of an appropriate time. I've had a few miles on the road now, and maybe, there's something to say.
Yeah.
So that, that's where I felt like, okay, he didn't come to me and say, I can't play on this record because you still don't have anything to say. So 7 years later, apparently I had something to say. I think I've still figured out a few more keystrokes since then, but it was worth going for, I think. Eventually you have to dive in.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and then basically afterwards, dap theory was also happening.
Yeah, they formed dap theory after that record. The next record was sort of like the beginnings of dap theory.
Are you still active, right? After 20 years?
We haven't played anything. I mean, I moved to Michigan, and then I got cancer, then moved to Michigan, and then COVID hit, and so
the Seasons of Being is the last one, right? I mean,
it's the last one, and that was a pretty big, ambitious record to do. So I just everybody got busy and moved away or got into different things, and it was kind of like this kind of that was the other factor too when I was making a decision with the trio. It was like, God, I don't even know how I'm going to be able to pull everybody together right now. Like, Chris was having a baby, wife's having a baby, Kenny was working with Brand X, Aaron was moving to California. Like, it was like there was all this stuff happening in people's lives. It was just like, this is a sign, I don't think it's going to be easy to do gigs.
Yeah,
not that it was ever easy, but it was going to be less easy, and so I still love playing with those guys, and it would be great to continue doing some more. I just haven't had a chance, and I've sort of like, I don't say I'm drifting. It's just that I have a lot of opportunities that are sort of been coming my way. That it's like managing my bandwidth is really. I'm not a great multitasker, so it's interesting trying to be able to be better at multitasking with the various things that are hitting me. Like I can't get into all the particulars, but I mean, like I'm working on a television show right now, which is really demanding. And if it's like, plus I have a full-time teaching job, which I'm on.
That's a lot. Now, yeah.
And then I still haven't mixed this record that we made in July. Okay.
Wow. Okay.
And I have this big commission to get to, so it's tough to try to find the right balance.
Priorities, kind of.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, but it's good. I mean, in a way, I was so happy when I heard you with the trio, because it's like this acoustic side of you, which of course you did it, but like not so often heard with you. I think, especially this.
In this way,
yeah, like. Yeah. In a piano trio format, like you said, it's really nice. It's so nice to hear that,
yeah, and it's also a reflection of all the stuff that happened.
Yeah, sure.
Since I started Dap Theory, right? I mean, I started Dap Theory in 1999. Well, then I went on to sort of have these two really different sounding duos, right? 2 pianos, piano harmonica. I did a solo piano record. And then I did a project that nobody really knows that much about because we didn't release the record. It was 2 pianos, 2 kotos, and animation. A project called Strings and Serpents, which was also with Benoit It was sort of
Oh,
bringing together the Crystal Magnets piano duo and this koto duo from Japan.
wow.
And we toured, and I made the recording, and I wasn't really thinking, well, why would I put this record out if we're not going to be able to tour again? Because there's a DVD. I was thinking it would be a DVD because it
Yeah.
was built around this animated film. So it's kind of just been sitting on a hard drive, hoping that I was going to find some time to mix it and put it out at this point, because I don't see it being something that I could tour really very easily.
That's a heavy one, yeah.
It was hard to do. The only way I was able to tour with it was to get a bunch of funding, grant support, which was very targeted for that particular project. And I was fortunate that I was able to get this funding when I did to create it and to tour it the first time. But when I tried again, the second time, I wasn't successful, and it just kind of it was like, wow, you put all this energy in and you didn't get the thing, and you're like, God, it's bringing people from 2 different continents with big instruments that are you're going to pay, you're going to give a lot of money to the airlines. It was just a tough juggernaut. But that music, building that project and the sounds that came out of that project and the approach to writing and all these different things, that goes into unison to me. It's like all this stuff is it's like all that is sort of it speaks for me now in this new group in a way. And so it's kind of a nice kind of synergy of all these things that I've been into, plus other bands, plus playing in Ralph's band,
Yeah, sure, and Ravi's
playing,
in between.
So yeah, it's just like the interesting way of being able to interface the things that you've done and be curious about, And not I couldn't have planned it,
No, definitely.
It's here,
But what about I saw you did a duo in Intact, which is a completely different side again of you playing with Ingrid.
Yeah.
And
well, that was Ingrid's idea,
surprised.
right?
Oh, really? Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, because Ingrid had a series of doing duos with pianists.
Yeah.
But she had never done one like this, where she had done it with someone that she hadn't played with before.
Oh, okay.
Usually she does a duo with somebody that she's got a pre-existing musical relationship with. Ingrid and I just knew each other. So we kind of knew each other's music, but we'd never worked together. And so then she approached me about it, and it was in the middle of the pandemic, and I was like, oh, that'd be awesome. Because this is be a great thing to work towards and respect her as a musician. And I thought, well, that'd be great, And so that was a treat, to have her music to work on and then go and make a recording. So it worked out nicely too that she's one of the guests on my new Unison record. So
really? Okay, fantastic.
Yeah, because it was just not that long after we were sort of working on stuff and talking a lot about going on the road, because we did a gig. Our very first gig we did was in Canada in the summer, and then we did a gig at the Jazz Gallery just a few weeks ago.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
And then we're going on tour in Europe for about a week or so in November.
Oh, fantastic! Are you in Austria maybe or something like that?
Maybe.
Oh, I'll have to check.
Maybe.
Okay.
I know we're in France and Switzerland and Belgium, I think.
Okay, yeah, I'll check where we are. Maybe if I can catch you somewhere, would be nice to see you.
There might be a gig in Austria. I don't know if she got it confirmed or not.
Okay, I'll check the schedules a little, and maybe I can catch you. Would be so cool.
Yeah. Wait, is that where you are?
I'm in Slovenia.
You're in Slovenia, okay.
Yeah, so which is if you're playing Graz, that's like half an hour for me, so it's really cool.
Right.
Vienna is like 2, so that's a little bit
a little far.
Yeah, tricky.
I know we're in Zurich.
Oh yeah, okay. Yeah, beautiful. It's it's really. I was surprised to see you and Ingrid. I mean, obviously you probably, like you said, you knew each other, but it's like different. I wouldn't associate you playing. I don't know why, but just like somehow.
Yeah, and it's funny that people say that, because it's like, I've played with Tom a bunch.
Yeah, sure.
And her husband, right? And so we know each other. We were both in American Composers Orchestra, jazz composers symposium, orchestral symposium I'm not saying the name of it properly, but that was the concept. Together, back, this is like 10 years ago, and we did this like intensive at UCLA, and with a bunch of other jazz composers writing for orchestra. And so, when you're doing things like that with people, you kind of, whether you know them in advance or not, you sort of have this common aha kind of experience, very much like bands, where you kind of, you kind of in the trenches with someone, and you appreciate the sort of change it's making for yourself and for them. And so we kind of had that experience together, and then subsequently we wrote pieces that we had a reading for orchestra with the American Composers Orchestra the following year, and so spent a lot of time together in that environment. And then just we just I think it was just sort of a matter of time, and it was great that she asked me.
Beautiful.
Because it was nice timing. It was rare that I'd be able to do a recording where I really could sit down and work on the music like that, because I wasn't doing anything at the time. And school would finish, and I was like, I just sit down and work on her music every day.
That's beautiful.
And then so when we got to the studio, I was like, yeah, let's go. And so we could focus on the kind of sounds that each of us was bringing to the music, rather than sort of figuring out like what the mechanics of how to play it. It was just like dive into what it sounded like, which is really a treat, because often you're just sort of focusing on like some mechanics, which is like you can't really put your ears to the sound if you're still a little anxious about the material itself. So that was a real treat, being able to do that with her. And she writes her ass off, so it's like really wonderful music, but it had like pianistic challenges, but like just smart form things that were going on that just kind of kept me on my toes, but stimulated.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
And so then we had a good vibe improvising together too. So it was really nice to build that, and then look forward to having a string of gigs to play the music. The very first gig we did, it was funny. I told this story now a couple of times, but like it was in Canada, and there was just like Delta Airlines just completely screwed her up. We were supposed to meet in Toronto and then have the same connecting flight. She didn't make it because they didn't leave LaGuardia in time. And so I got all the way out to Winnipeg, and I'm sitting there going, okay, so when do you think you're going to get here? And she's like, I don't know. And she was still in New York, and was like,
oh shit,
getting a little nerve-wracking. The day is going by. She's finally got a ticket, but she like had to get another ticket on a different airline to get her there on time. And it was like, we had just hoped that the festival was going to be willing to compensate us for that, because otherwise she was like, you're going to have to do the gig by yourself. And so I went on stage, and she still wasn't there.
Oh,
and so it was kind of like we couldn't push the gig back any further, because there was a second band after us, and we'd sort of pushed it as far as we could. So I hadn't come there prepared to do a solo piano concert, and I was like going, wow, okay, so maybe not, And anyway, she arrived partway through the set, so I only did like a couple tunes by myself, and it was so fascinating, because like we had, it was just like rush into it. First time playing the music publicly. And it was really interesting to see what the tolerance of the music itself was, because, you have a certain, preciousness around the music. You write this music, you rehearse it, you record it. This is how it's supposed to go. And then you throw all of that out because they didn't have a music stand. The light was terrible. She couldn't see the music. Like it was like, pick something. And she's been traveling all day. Hasn't had time to take a shower, like nothing. It's just a really grueling kind of thing, from a relatively short distance too. It wasn't like she was going to Australia or South Africa. So you throw all that expectation stuff away, and you just use your ears, and you go, okay, how much do I remember how this goes, and what's the essence of it, and then how do I improvise off of that? And it was really fun. As much as it was nerve-wracking, it was really fun, because right out of the gate we got to see what the flexibility of the music could be. Versus maybe waiting like 10 gigs to kind of, or 3 or 4 gigs to sort of find that. It was like you just were just throwing right at it. It was kind of fun, but it was nerve-wracking, but in the end, you sort of laughed about it, because you don't get that chance all the time.
No, luckily or not.
Well, sort of luckily,
kind of.
Sort of luckily. I mean, in a way, it's kind of cool. But we could always just take that chance. But we're generally not I mean, that's sort of, to me, almost like a Braxton way of thinking of things, where you would just sort of kind of go, all right, well, now, good, that's great, we've had that conversation, but put that all away.
Yeah.
Think about this now.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to kind of like imagine those kinds of paradigms in a way.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. What about Ralph? Are you still doing the stuff? I know Imaginary Friends was the last one, right? You guys did together on Ralph's music.
Yeah.
I mean, is that the band still kind of active, or like, are you planning some new music with him, or?
He wants to do another tour next summer.
Really? Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know when we'll get around to making a recording. Probably not super quickly, but yeah, no, I think he still wants to keep that band churning along, which is great,
Yeah.
I mean, he's been living in Switzerland, so everything gets a little harder when people start to, disperse.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. But it's a nice band. I mean, I hope get some more music of that one. It's
it'd be fun. It'd be fun. I enjoy playing with those guys.
Yeah, such a beautiful one. Yeah, it's cool. Great. Well, Andy, I hope to see you. In November if you're in Austria. So
yeah, I'm playing because I'm also playing in this large project, Black Lives from Generation to Generation, which is a compilation record that I did that came out in the spring, but we did it during COVID. So it's a lot of musicians you're probably familiar with: Reggie Washington, David Gilmour, Mark Gilmour, Jeannie Lake, both Stricklands, I think, Jacques Spard, Jean-Paul Borelli.
Really?
A lot of artists. Man. Yeah, a lot of artists. It was sort of produced by Steffi Kallenberg, who's Reggie Washington's wife, who's an agent and manager in Switzerland, or in not Switzerland, in Belgium. And so we're touring. Federico Peña Gonzalez is playing keyboards as well as me playing piano on that. So it's like a big group. I think it's probably about 14 or 15 of us on stage.
You're in Europe?
Not all at the same time. In Europe, yeah.
Really? Wow.
In November, first part of November.
Oh, okay. I have to check it.
So I know we're at Strasbourg. We're in Brussels. There's a couple gigs I can't do because I have the tour with Ingrid right after it. So there's like maybe one or two gigs at the end of that tour that I can't do. But
oh, that's a big one.
Yeah,
wow.
Yeah, it's a big one. It's weird because we have all these gigs and we've never played a note together. I mean, not like as this band.
Yeah, sure. I know what you mean.
Before.
Yeah.
But we all recorded pieces individually with different people. Like I recorded it with Unison plus some guests. I did it all like, asynchronously remotely. And then, so we have this album of all this music that we're now going to play live that in a way, some of the people maybe played on some of each other's projects, but by and large, that wasn't the band.
Well, so it's fun. It's killing.
It's going to be interesting, to see how it all. We got a couple of days of rehearsals in Brussels just to kind of get going, to kind of put it all together.
Yeah. What about the trio? Next year you're coming to Europe with Clarence or John or something like that?
I haven't even tried to get gigs in Europe. I stopped trying to get gigs in Europe like 10 years ago.
Really? Oh,
yeah.
Wow. Really?
Yeah. I just was like, I can't get arrested in Europe, so I guess I won't try.
Yeah, but you should with this trio, seriously.
Yeah, every time I tried to get an agent to book gigs for me, it was just I couldn't manage to secure enough gigs to make a tour with. This was like years ago.
Yeah, you should try it. I mean, just with this trio, I mean, you would get like 10 gigs easily. I think
I would like to think so. But,
definitely.
It's a tough trio to book because those guys are both.
Sure. Yeah, sure. That's a different story.
It's tough to book something that's speculative. It's kind of like got to be like it's going to happen.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, hopefully. I mean,
I'd love to. Yeah, I'd love to.
It'd be a nice one. Super.
So, Samo, thanks for asking me to do this.
Yeah, thank you for taking the time and for all the music and everything. So
sure, appreciate your interest. I guess you'll.